Well, I think President Putin was emphasizing certain things that we in the West don't really pay enough attention to. First of all, he's emphasizing strategic interests in the broad sense. We tend to personalize everything, and that's ridiculous. It doesn't make any difference whether the leader of the United States or Great Britain or any other sovereign state and the leader of Russia love each other or hate each other. What counts are interests, strategic interests. We've gotten away from that because, frankly, I'm talking about the United States, we're not pursuing our strategic interests. We have no strategic interest in eastern Ukraine. In fact, one can make the argument that the only real strategic interests we have are in prosperity, peace, and stability, all of which are inextricably intertwined. We are preeminently a commercial power. People talk about the American empire. Well, it's much like the British Empire in the sense that we are a commercial empire. Now, if we're failing, it's because we've lost sight of the commercial purposes of our outreach. We've substituted military power for economic influence and investment. We've substituted military power for cultural and political understanding and cooperation. So I think that's part of why Tucker did what he did. I mean, let's face it, we've been listening to all sorts of terrible things about this man, Putin, and people eagerly inhale all this nonsense instead of listening to the man who is currently the Russian head of state. And what's his principal message? We have been here since 932. We are not going anywhere. We will continue to exist. Understand that. We want to live with you. We want you to live with us. We're not the same, but our interests and your interests do not necessarily conflict. We have no interest in Eastern Europe. We're not interested in a war in Eastern Europe. And of course, as you and I have talked before, all you had to do was look at the initial stage of this Russian special military operation. When they went in with a very small force. Only 90,000 combat troops. There were 200,000 involved, but only 90,000 who actually do any fighting. And they were very anxious to have a settlement. And they were very close to reaching a settlement. And then Boris Johnson, at the behest of the United States government, flew in to effectively destroy the agreement, which he did, and ensure that the war would continue. And he made a number of statements in private to Zelensky, which were wrong and fundamentally false. And those statements are the things we tell ourselves. Russia is weak. The Russian economy is weak. The Russian people don't support the government. They will not withstand the might of the United States and its allies. We have more economic power, more influence, and the support of the people. All of that, of course, has ended up on the ash heap of history. Russia is enormously powerful. Why? They have an abundance of resources that they can draw upon. They have a population that loves the country. They're Russians. They believe in themselves. They believe in their religion. They believe in their country and their leadership. Does that mean that they all love Putin? Certainly not. But they believe in what they are and they're willing to fight for it. So we set up Ukraine for failure and we've destroyed that nation. We've killed hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians needlessly. We've driven half the population out of the country, probably 1 million plus wounded on top of the more than 500,000 dead. It's a catastrophe. And you know what? At some point, the United States will do what it has always done. Leave. We just leave. We are preeminently a maritime power and an aerospace power. When things don't go our way, we pack up and we go home. We are only a land power in the Western Hemisphere. And so that's one of the reasons we've tried to fight this war against Russia on the cheap at the expense of the Ukrainian people. And I would argue at the expense of the Europeans, whose economies are in ruins. So in sum, I have not much more to say except that this is what's going to happen in the future. We will just leave. And then the Europeans are going to have to sort out whatever remains. And I don't know what that'll be. I can't predict that with certainty because if you sat down with Putin today, and this should have been very clear from that interview, and said, look, we want to put an end to this. You could say to Putin, you draw the line that you think is commensurate with your strategic interests. And then we'll draw our line and we'll come to some sort of agreement. And no one's willing to do that. But that's the quickest and easiest way to end the war. because we're not going to attract any positive investment into Ukraine to restore any measure of civilization there until this is over.